It wasn't meant for me to hear. My phone came on as I was at my desk, idly browsing spreadsheets on my laptop. A flash of dad appeared on the screen. My chest constricted. In the past, that moniker had connotations of warmth and security, but these days, it merely felt like a duty. With a sigh, I replied, "Hey, Dad." Initially, there was no answer. I initially believed there was a poor connection until I heard a chair scrape across the floor, and then a sigh. Then he spoke in a low, sharp voice. "She's a failure. She'll never succeed." My stomach turned over. My hand gripped the phone more tightly. "What on earth?" My mother's voice came next, weaker but no less piercing. She said, "Come on, David. She is doing well." "Doesn't she pay the mortgage?" My father sneered. "After everything we've done for her, that's the least she could do." "Do you believe I'm pleased with her? She was a continual letdown, an error that ought never to have occurred. And she considers herself a success?" He gave a sour laugh. "She is only ever going to be a joke, an error." The words pierced me like sharp blades. My mouth became parched. Painfully, my heart pounded in my chest. I wanted to yell and toss the phone across the room, but I was immobile. I was having trouble breathing. My father went on, his voice icy. "She's lucky we even let her be part of this family. I don't see why she makes so an effort. She will never be among us." The line then stopped working. As I sat there, his remarks were overshadowed by the quiet. I lowered the phone on my desk with trembling palms. My heart felt like it was trying to burst out of my chest because it was beating so rapidly. That was never intended for me to hear. It was not my father's intention to call me. He had neglected to end the call. I realized then that this was how he had always felt. Simply put, he had never spoken it aloud. However, it wasn't even the worst. I'd been paying their mortgage in secret for the past 6 years. They believed that the bank was receiving their payments, but in reality, I had purchased their mortgage from the bank using Harrison Capital, the investment firm I had established with the assistance of my financial advisor. Years ago, they were on the verge of losing the house, and I saved them. They were living off of my kindness without realizing it. They never would have cared. I understood now. I had dedicated my life to gaining my father's acceptance. A perfect score? Insufficient? Promotions? Anticipated. At 25, buying my first home? A financial waste? It was never enough, no matter how hard I worked or how successful I got. I was never sufficient. However, everything changed at this particular instant. I opened the Harrison Capital, property #7 folder on my laptop with steady hands. The ownership information, payment plans, and mortgage documentation were all spelled clearly. My father believed I was a failure, but he was going to find out just who he had been relying on for so long. I wasn't going to ignore this. I was going to hold him accountable. That night, as I laid in bed and stared at the ceiling, my father's words kept repeating in my mind. She was an error that ought never to have occurred. The assurance in his voice was more than just an insult. He stated it as though it were a truth rather than an opinion, as though my life had been a complete hassle. A part of me had always hoped that if I worked hard enough and showed myself enough, my father, who had never been one to give me praise, would eventually view me as more than a failure. When I heard that call, that hope was dashed. By dawn, the pain had subsided, swapped out for something colder. After getting out of bed, I sat down at my desk and brewed a cup of black coffee. I opened the files again, the light from my laptop reflecting off the steel edge of my face. In reality, the mortgage they believed they were paying was in my name. Years ago, when my parents were just a few months away from going into foreclosure, the bank had moved it to Harrison Capital. Back then, my mother had pleaded with me for assistance, sobbing and in need. Naturally, my father had been too arrogant to inquire. Nevertheless, I had intervened. I had made the ideal preparation. In the mistaken belief that they were paying the bank, every check they sent went straight to my LLC. Naturally, I had been making up the shortfall for 6 years, paying thousands of dollars each month. Never before had I asked for a thank you. I didn't think they would grovel. However, I had anticipated basic civility. I focused on a specific clause after clicking through the pages. My financial advisor, Nick, recommended a purchase option clause when I first set up the mortgage buyout as a safety net in case things didn't work out. That's when I'd laughed. What might go wrong? I wasn't laughing now. Harrison Capital would have the authority to take immediate complete ownership of the house if they failed to make a payment. My parents would be reduced to monthly renters. What if they were unable to pay the rent? According to state law, I could evict them. The weight of it settled over me as I reclined in my chair. My dad believed that I was weak. I was nothing to him. But all along, I had been in possession of the keys to his life. It buzzed on my phone. "Mom, this Sunday, would you be able to join us for dinner? We hope to see you soon." My mouth curled into a sour smile as I gazed at the letter. She last asked me to supper when they were in need of cash. I considered ignoring it, but I decided to comply since I felt compelled to. If my dad could act as though he loved me, I could do the same. Me, obviously, anticipating it. It was a falsehood, but it was necessary. I wanted to do one more check before shutting off my laptop. My father's older brother, my Uncle Ray, had always supported me. I had never been treated like I mattered by anyone in the family until him. I sent him a text. "Me, Uncle Ray, can you remember anything Dad has said about me? Is there anything out of the ordinary?" He responded almost immediately. "Ray, we must speak." I felt a pit in my gut. When my phone rang, I picked it up right away. "Uncle Ray?" He let out a sigh. "Jess, it's worse than you think, and I didn't want to be the one to tell you that." My chest constricted. "How much worse?" Ray paused. "Next, something has been planned by them." I straightened my posture. "What?" "Your father has been investigating your finances," Ray stated in a firm voice. "He believes you have been keeping money hidden from them, and he intends to coerce you if you don't give him more money." In my ears, blood roared. "How?" Ray's tone grew gloomy. "He suggested phoning your boss, attempting to undermine you, perhaps even requesting an audit from the IRS. A chilly, piercing rage took root in my chest. They weren't simply unappreciative. They were attempting to ruin me. I clenched my fingers into fists and inhaled slowly. "Uncle Ray," I muttered. "Yes, I require evidence, because I was viewed as weak by my parents. They were going to learn their mistake. I prepared for the next 2 days. I was going to show my father how dangerous it was to underestimate me if he chose to play dirty. I started by giving my financial advisor, Nick, a call. Since I founded Harrison Capital, Nick had been by my side. He was shrewd, straightforward, and ever one step ahead. Nick said, "Jess," in a kind tone, "I understand that this is more than just a casual call." I tapped my pen against the desk and said, "Not exactly. I need to know the specifics of our agreement on property #7. How quickly can I take action if they fail to make a payment?" Nick made no hesitation at all. "Right away," he said. "Harrison Capital can take complete ownership as soon as they default, because to the purchase option provision, unless they have, say, $450,000 hanging around to buy you out, they would have no legal options." I gave a chilly smile. "They don't. So they're screwed," Nick stated plainly. A calmness swept over me. "Command, I had it at last," I said. "There's one more thing I need you to do. Keep an eye on their account. They seem to be having trouble already. I need proof that their upcoming payment will be unsuccessful." Nick laughed. "It won't be long. Their balance appears to be dangerously low. They're doomed if they don't find $6,500 by the 15th. I looked at the schedule. 4 days. It would be 4 days before my father, who had referred to me as a failure, woke up and realized that he had been living off my charity all along. He would have to plead with me for assistance in 4 days. Furthermore, I refused to give it. I pretended nothing had happened when I drove to my folks' house on Sunday. Now it was strange to look at it. Picture perfect from the outside, the 2-story colonial-style house with a wraparound porch and well-trimmed bushes. But that was hostile territory to me. With a broad smile on her face, my mother opened the door. "My dear Jessica." She hugged me tightly as she gushed. Her kindness seemed phony. Now I knew it all along. The aroma of roasted chicken and garlic filled the air as I entered. With his arms folded and his face hard, my father sat at the head of the table. Adam, my brother, reclined back in his chair, grinning smugly as usual. Adam was the golden child, the one who did nothing at all with his life but was incapable of doing anything wrong. Even though I had put forth a lot of effort to advance my career, I was still the letdown. I sat down wearing a tranquil mask. My father's voice was tight with artificial warmth as he said, "Jessica, it's nice to meet you," I answered icily. "You too, Dad." With an unduly pleasant tone, my mother jumped in. She reached for my hand across the table and remarked, "Recently, we've been thinking a lot about family, about how crucial it is to help one another through challenging times." I didn't respond. "That's accurate," I stated calmly. My dad sighed, as if this was difficult for him. "The fact is, Jessica, we need your assistance." "It's coming." I cocked my head. "What can I help with?" With caution, my father remarked, "This month's mortgage payment is a little tight." A bit too tight. He was still downplaying the fact that they were going to default. "What amount do you require?" I pretended to be ignorant as I asked. My mother paused. "We were considering simply an additional $3,000 each month. That ought to keep us steady." My mouth quirked. They were unaware that I was already making a monthly payment of $6,500, and now they wanted me to top it off with an additional $3,000? I tilted my head and put down my fork. That sum is substantial. For an instant, my father's mask came off, and his face lit up with annoyance. He said, "It's nothing in comparison to what we've done for you. We brought you up, gave everything to you. Supporting your family is the least you can do. The least I can do." They were the same individuals who had made fun of me behind my back. The same father who had lived beneath my home and declared me a failure. I clenched my jaw. I made an effort to keep my face neutral. "At last," I answered. "I'll give it some thought." My mom let out a sigh of relief. "Oh, thank you, my love. We were confident in your reliability. You can rely on me." I gave a stiff smile. They were unaware that they would lose everything in 3 days. Nick called that evening. He declared, "They defaulted." A wave of gratification swept over me. "What?" Nick reiterated. "They failed to make the mortgage payment. The money was absent. Harrison Capital will formally be the sole owner of the house as of midnight tonight." I let out a calm breath and closed my eyes. It was finished. My tenant was my father, the man who had always denigrated me. Nick's tone became piercing. "Are you ready to begin the eviction procedure?" I grinned to myself. Not just yet. I was curious to see how long it would take them to come to terms with the reality. My fingers brushed the framed family photo on my desk as I reclined in my chair. It was from a long time ago, when I still thought my father could love. Not quite yet, I reasoned. Before they break, let's see how far they will go, since they would shatter. And I wouldn't be around to catch them this time. After 3 days, my parents' quiet was unbearable. No phone calls. Don't text. Don't send guilt-tripping messages about family unity. I understood why. They were still unaware of it. They continued to believe that their money had been processed. They continued to think that everything was under control. Precisely at 9:07 a.m., the message showed up in my inbox on Friday morning. Subject: Property #7 default notice from Legal Department of Harrison Capital. My heart was racing with a mixture of excitement and relief when I opened the email. The purchase option clause has been activated because the agreed-upon mortgage payment was not submitted by the deadline of the 15th. Harrison Capital is the exclusive owner of the property at Oakwood Drive as of right now. Subject to future rental agreements, the current occupants shall be regarded as month-to-month tenants in accordance with contractual arrangements. Eviction procedures could follow non-compliance with the rental agreement. I gazed at the display. I ran my fingers across the keyboard. It was this. I didn't need to give them a call initially. They would approach me. I heard my phone vibrate at 9:42 a.m. Mom. I let the voicemail go. She made another call at 9:47 a.m. It was my father at 9:50 a.m. Before I picked them up, I allowed them to perspire for 1 entire hour. "Jessica." My mother's voice sounded desperate. "The bank has made a mistake of some sort. We just received a notification stating that we have fallen behind on our mortgage." "But that isn't possible. You must assist us." With a gentle smile curving at the corners of my lips, I sat back in my chair. "It's not an error," I stated. "Quiet." "What?" my mother murmured. Slowly and plainly, I reiterated, "It's not a mistake," I answered calmly. "You didn't pay your mortgage. The house, then? It is no longer yours." A moment of shock. Next, with a stern, low voice, my father responded, "No, that's not possible. The bank has the mortgage. For years, we have been making the payment." That lingered in the air for a moment before I struck the last blow. I said, "Dad, you weren't paying the bank. I was getting paid by you." Quiet, astonished, icy quiet. At last, my father remarked, "You're lying." I could hear the anxiety underneath his sharp, low voice. I let out a sigh. "No, I'm not." As if this were just another business conversation, I spoke in a steady, almost bored tone. "When you nearly lost the house 6 years ago, I purchased the mortgage. You wrote checks to Harrison Capital, which is my company, believing that you were paying the bank." My brother Adam's voice interrupted. "You mean to tell me that we've been paying rent to our own failure of a sister all along?" He gave a sour laugh. "That clarifies why the bank is in disarray. Like everything else, you most likely made a mess of the paperwork." I clenched my jaw. Adam had always been conceited, entitled, and ruthless. He was the family's brightest star, even if he were to crash a car, lose his job, or fail school. He was the golden child. I could create an empire out of nothing in the meanwhile and still be called the letdown. "You are very welcome," I responded icily. Adam laughed. My father interrupted my mother as she began to speak. "This bluff," he snarled. "You wouldn't treat your own family in this manner." I gave a small smile. Would I not? My dad had always relied on my weakness. He believed that if things became tough, I would give up. He was going to learn his mistake. Calmly, I responded, "I've already spoken to my lawyer. You're out if you don't pay. And I'll file charges if you attempt any of the following: manipulation, threats, or any accidental damage to the residence." "You unappreciative little..." Before he could finish, I hung up. Almost instantly, my phone was overflowing with texts. "Mom, let's chat, Jessica, please. We are related. You'll regret this, Dad. Take note of what I say. Adam, you believe you're very intelligent? You are nothing more than a resentful, pitiful loser. We'll figure out how to reclaim the house. Observe." I read them all. After that, their numbers were blocked. They had been trying to convince me for years that I was the issue, that I wasn't good enough, and that I should be thankful for simply being in their world. They were the ones without a place to live now, and I was at last free. It was 3 days later, quiet. I didn't think my dad would give up so quickly. He always fought his way to victory. He was the kind of man who would sooner burn everything down than concede defeat. Thus, at 10:00 a.m., I received a call from an unidentified number. I wasn't shocked Wednesday morning. I choose to disregard it. Another call was received a minute later. Next, an email. Subject: home foreclosure error. Immediate, on behalf of Hastings Law Firm, I took it open. To Miss Harrison, your parents, David and Karen Harrison, have gotten in touch with us about the recent foreclosure of their house. They would like to talk about the potential of regaining possession, since they think there has been a misunderstanding. To prevent more legal issues, please get in touch with us as soon as possible. Regards, Hastings, John R. Esquire. I sent Nick the email with a chilly smile. He gave me a call back less than 10 minutes later. He laughed and remarked, "They don't have a case. The mortgage deal was signed by them. The buy option clause was signed by them. Everything was signed by them. Since you are legally correct, they are unable to contest this in court." "I assumed," I murmured. "But they're not going to stop, are they?" "Oh," Nick remarked, "they'll try, but they are powerless to do anything." I considered my father, his conceit, his vanity, and the fact that he would sooner ruin me than acknowledge his own failure. They wouldn't stop, no, not until they were left with nothing to cling to. Uncle Ray gave me a call that evening. "Jess," he said without introducing himself, "I just spoke with your father on the phone." My stomach grew constricted. What did he say? Ray let out a sigh. "He's not merely attempting to use the law to oppose this. He's trying to get you to cave in different ways." I straightened my posture. "What is meant by that?" "He's phoning your workplace. Attempting to get you dismissed." A shiver went through my body. "Are you serious?" "Indeed. He swore to me that he would ruin me in some other way if I didn't give them the house voluntarily. He mentioned contacting HR, fabricating a complaint, attempting to frame you for fraud. or doing anything else that would harm your reputation. I balled my hands into fists. My father was looking for blood, not just rage. I muttered, I need proof. According to Ray, I'm working on it. He paused before saying, But Jess, you must defend yourself. I inhaled deeply. I understand. I myself went into HR the following morning. Lauren, my manager, looked up from her desk. Jessica, what is going on? I made an effort to grin. I need to discuss something with you. In private, after guiding me into her office, she closed the door. I took a deep breath and sat down. I paused before saying, My father, he will attempt to have me fired. Lauren furrowed her brows. What? I described everything. The mortgage, the dangers, the possible campaign of disinformation. She folded her arms and sat back in her chair when I was done. She said, Let me be clear. You won't get anywhere. I felt a wave of relief. She stated, We deal with this kind of thing more often than you'd think. Those who harbor resentment, drama in the family, misleading reports. We'll record everything if your father calls, but I can assure you that he has no authority to interfere with your employment. She smiled at me comfortingly. I'll let our legal team know. We'll give him a cease and desist if he crosses the line even a single step. I released my breath, letting go of the tightness in my body. In addition to losing his home, my father also lost his authority over me. It happened that night. Someone knocked on my door, hard, immediate. Before I ever opened it, I knew who it was. I opened the door. There stood my parents. My father's face was flushed with rage that he could hardly contain. My mom was crying so hard that her eyes swelled. My mother whispered, Jessica, please. I crossed my arms. What are you looking for? My father added in a low, menacing voice. We need the house back. I cocked my head. It is no longer your home. My mom put her hands together in a clasp. We brought you up. We sacrificed everything for you. For what are you punishing us? For referring to me as a failure? I yelled. For claiming that I was an error? For attempting to destroy my life as soon as I stopped paying you? My mom winced. My dad's jaw tightened. He remarked, You're being cruel. I laughed without humor. No, father. I'm being reasonable. My dad's eyes grew gloomy. A grimace curved his lips. He said, You'll regret this. You're not winning even though you believe you are. Without us, you will never be anything. You will come to understand that one day. Inside of me, something made sense. That he could ever change was the last glimmer of hope I had left. I looked him in the eye. Well, I suppose we'll see. I closed the door in their faces after that. I felt totally free for the first time in my life. After they went, I sat there for a while. My heart was thumping in my chest as my hands continued to hold the doorknob. My mind replayed my father's final words. You'll regret this. You'll never be anything without us. It was there. The reality. The conviction he'd always had. I owed my success to him. That I was nothing without him. The problem is that he had no bearing on my current location. Every accomplishment, every promotion, and every dollar I had made had been me. He hadn't made me feel better. He attempted to pull me down, and he was unable to tolerate me now that I had at last escaped. I refused to allow him to drag me back down. Not now. I gave Nick a call the following morning. On the first ring, he said, Jess, any repercussions? I answered, pacing my flat, not yet. But it will happen. He let out a sigh. Do you want me to proceed with sending out the notice of eviction? Not yet, I said, my thoughts racing. They're still attempting to combat this. I'm interested in seeing what they do next. Nick paused. Are you certain? I gave a faint smile. Believe me. 2 days went by. The next attack followed. My phone buzzed when I was in the middle of a meeting. A message from my manager, Lauren. Lauren, hello. Your dad gave HR a call. Come down here, you must. I excused myself and went directly to Human Resources. Lauren was waiting in front of her workplace. Jessica, she said, her face piercing. Enter now. I took a seat and began to prepare myself. A printed email was slid across the desk by Lauren. It arrived 20 minutes ago. I grabbed it. Subject: Serious issues with employee behavior from David Harrison regarding whom it concerns. I'm writing to formally voice my worries about Jessica Harrison's actions and financial dealings with the business. She has been mismanaging corporate cash and engaged in dubious business practices. And I have cause to think this. I implore you to thoroughly look into her financial transactions for the integrity of the business. With all due respect, Harrison, David, my palms shaking in anger, I lowered the paper. I responded icily, "He's trying to get me fired." Lauren's face grew serious. "Indeed. And this might have done serious harm if you weren't so incredibly skilled at your work. Now what?" "Nothing," said Lauren. "This complaint has already been marked as malicious by our legal staff. Furthermore, considering that it comes from your father, let's just say that it lacks credibility." With a sigh, I released the tension in my body. Lauren's eyes softened as she said, "Jessica, we would understand if you wanted to take some time off." "No," I firmly answered. "I'm all right." My father had rattled me, and I wasn't going to give him the joy of knowing it. Lauren gave a nod. "If he tries anything else, let me know." I got up and put the letter in my pocket after folding it. Did he wish to be shady? All right. I could also play nasty. I gave Uncle Ray a call that evening. "Jess," he replied right away. "What's happening?" With a firm voice, I declared, "They're not stopping. Just now, my dad tried to get me fired." Ray let out a deep sigh. "I wish I could say that I'm shocked." "I need evidence," I uttered. "Verifiable proof that they intend to pursue me." Ray paused. "Jess, you should be aware of something." I went cold. "What?" "Adam," Ray murmured. "He's involved." My chest constricted. "What are you saying? Your dad isn't working by himself. He has been assisted by Adam. It was him who recommended getting in touch with your employer. Furthermore, it's worse than that." I held on to the phone. "Tell me." Ray's tone grew gloomy. "Adam has been investigating your financial situation, Jess. He has been attempting to determine your true wealth. Adam has been looking for evidence to support your father's suspicion that you are hiding money." My stomach turned over. It wasn't surprising to me. The fact that I was more successful than Adam had always made him unhappy. The fact that I had put in more effort was irrelevant. He thought he had a right to what I had. He was now actively assisting my father in bringing me down. "Are you certain about this?" I inquired. Ray said, "I wish I wasn't." "Observe, Jess. You want to do this alone, I know that. However, perhaps it's time to cut them off entirely." I let out a slow breath. "I'm working on it already." "Jess," Ray murmured slowly, "if they attempt to legally pursue you, they won't," I interrupted, "because they have nothing left with which to negotiate." "Just exercise caution," Ray advised. I gave a small smile. "I'm cautious all the time." My father called 2 days later. I nearly didn't respond. However, I had a feeling it would be worthwhile. "Jessica," he stated in a chilly tone, "we must speak, do we?" I said in a dull tone. He said, "You're making a mistake. We are related. This is not how families treat one another." I grinned. "It's funny. I seem to recall you telling Adam that if I didn't give Adam more money, you would ruin me." My dad's breath caught. "Where did that come from?" "It doesn't matter. There was a perilous quiet between us." Then he spoke softly. "You won't prevail in this." "I have already." His voice tightened as he continued. "We'll fight this. The house will be returned to us. You believe you understand everything, but you're mistaken. You require us. You always have." It dawned on me then. The house didn't really matter to him. The money didn't matter to him. The control was important to him. His final hold on me had been my accomplishment. He still held authority as long as I was still attempting to gain his approval. But now that I was no longer interested, he was left with nothing. I said, "You won't get the house back, and I'll file charges if you try to harm me or my career." "You wouldn't. Give me a try." Another tense stillness. Then he lowered his voice. "Jessica, you'll regret this." I grinned. "No, I won't." I then hung up. I completed the eviction notice that evening. Subject, property #7, notice to vacate to Mr. Harrison and Miss S. Harrison. Due to non-payment, the mortgage agreement for the property at Oakwood Drive is no longer in force, as was previously informed. Your tenancy is formally terminated as of today. Within 30 days, you must leave the property. Formal eviction procedures will follow non-compliance. Regards, Harrison, Jessica Harrison Capital, the owner for a long time. I gazed at the email. I then clicked send. It was finished. 30 days. That was their remaining time. They were permanently removed from my life after that. I closed my eyes and reclined in my chair. I had dedicated my entire life to gaining my father's approval. I've been praying for years that one day he'll see someone in me to be proud of. But I was aware of the reality now. What I did didn't matter. For him, it would never be enough. Furthermore, I didn't require it to be. It was 2 weeks later. Quiet. They were stalling, and I knew it. My father was not the kind to give up easily. He was waiting, looking for a way out, trying to think of some desperate scheme to get back in control. However, there wasn't. Every contract, document, and signature was flawless. That was something Nick had ensured. There was nothing left for them to control me. They were aware of it. I received a call from Nick on day 29. His tone was stern when he said, "Jess, they have asked to meet." "With whom?" "Me," said Nick. "They wish to engage in negotiations." I gave a small smile. "Have you informed them that there is nothing to compromise on?" "Oh," responded Nick. I told them. "They're desperate, though. According to your father, he is open to making a deal." He was, of course. "When?" I inquired. "They would like to get together tomorrow morning." I thought about it. I didn't have to spend time with them. But when I told them it was done, there was a part of me that wanted to see their reactions. Then I said, "Set it up." I met Nick at his workplace the following morning. I followed him to the meeting room. I could see my parents seated rigidly at the long table through the glass partition. My mother's face looked pale as she fidgeted with the hem of her blouse. With his eyes steely and his jaw clenched, my father sat expressionless. Adam had that smug little look he always had as he sat next to him, arms crossed. I inhaled deeply, regained my balance, and pushed the door open. With a stern voice, my father said, "Jessica." "David," I said calmly as I sat down across from them. Nick took a seat next to me and opened a folder of papers. My dad's eyes squinted. "Enough is enough of this." I arched an eyebrow. "Is it?" He bent over. "We're prepared to reach a consensus. The mortgage payments will once more be handled by us. You are welcome to return the deed to us." It nearly made me chuckle. "You're short on funds." My dad's mouth clenched. "We'll work it out." I said, "You had 6 years to figure it out. You didn't." My mother's high-pitched, begging voice came in. "Please, Jessica. You were reared by us. We sacrificed everything for you. Will you actually take our house away from us?" "Cease," I snapped. She winced. I responded icily, "You didn't give me everything. Instead of because of you, I got to where I am in spite of you. And you sat back and called me a failure behind my back as I paid for this house for 6 years." My dad's eyes grew gloomy. "Your argument has been made. Let's be sensible now. I'm being reasonable here." He twisted his mouth into a sneer. "This is something you will regret." With a gentle smile curving at the corners of my lips, I sat back in my chair. "No, I'm not." Nick moved a piece of paper across the table. "This is the official notice of eviction," Nick stated. "You've got 24 hours to leave the property. Legal action will follow non-compliance." My mom's hand went to her lips. My dad got red in the face. Adam crossed his arms, leaned back, and twisted his mouth into a hideous grin. Adam remarked, "You believe that you are superior to us." I grinned. "No, I simply quit allowing you to drag me down." My father's chair scraped the floor when he stood up suddenly. "You're doing something wrong." "No," I replied. "You did." His face was contorted with anger as he gazed at me. But underneath that, I could see worry. Actual, authentic terror. He said, "You'll come crawling back. You'll realize you need us one day." I stood and looked him in the eye. "No," I quietly said. "You are not necessary to me." I didn't. I turned and left the room without turning around. They vanished the following day. That morning, Nick gave me a call. He declared, "They're out." Overnight, I packed up and left. I let out a slow breath. "Well done." "They left very little behind," Nick remarked. "The house is largely undamaged. There are a few items in the garage, but nothing of value. Any harm? There is nothing we cannot fix." "Well," I replied. Later that afternoon, I took a car to the house. Now it was deserted, frighteningly silent. My footsteps reverberated through the empty rooms as I entered through the front door. The house didn't feel as big as I remembered, less significant, not as heavy. I passed the kitchen where my mom used to prepare meals. My father used to sit in his recliner in the living room and act as though he couldn't hear me when I talked. At the bottom of the stairs, I paused and touched the banister. For so long, this mansion had served as a prison. In their eyes, I was a reminder of everything I would never be. No more. Without turning around, I left via the front door. Within 2 weeks, the house was sold. I almost immediately received a monetary offer because the market was doing well. The money was not retained by me. Rather, I established a foundation for young women fleeing financially abusive households, people like me, who had been indoctrinated that they owed their families everything simply for being alive. Because I understood what it was like to be confined. I understood what it was like to think that one had to earn affection. However, all of this had taught me something crucial. Blood does not define true family. It depends on who supports you, who honors you, who unconditionally loves you. They were not my true family. I was the one. My mother sent me a mail 3 months later. "Mom, please, Jessica, I'm at a loss on where to go. Can we have a conversation?" I looked at it for a while. I would have been in excruciating pain over this a few months ago. I would have wondered if I was being too severe, too mean. However, now, I knew better now. I removed the message. Some bridges are worthy of being set on fire. Furthermore, I wasn't turning around. Uncle Ray called a week later. "Jess, I heard that your parents are staying with Adam," he added. I chuckled. "I'm going to assume that he is already whining." Ray laughed. "To put it mildly, Adam isn't as giving as you were." I grinned. "No longer my problem." "Nope," Ray replied. "It isn't." That night, I watched the sunset over the city skyline from my balcony. I am holding a glass of wine, a refreshing wind on my skin. I experienced lightness. Free. It buzzed on my phone. Nick sent a message. "Nick, this weekend, any drinks?" I get the first round. I grinned. Me, definitely. Leaning back in my chair, I allowed the rest of the stress to leave my body. I was no longer holding them up for the first time in my life. What if they fell? It wasn't my problem, it was theirs.